Hi, Sage here with Hippie from the 49th. I think this video is important. This is about power, planning, and pattern recognition. Over the past several years, a coordinated effort has emerged to reshape how government functions in the United States. The effort is known as Project 2025. What makes this movement different is not the existence of ideology, because ideology has always existed, but the level of preparation behind it and the speed in which it is being implemented. In this video, I'm going to walk through how we got here and what Project 2025 actually proposes and why its implications extend beyond American borders. Not to provoke fear, but to encourage awareness. Because understanding what's happening is the first step to understanding what's at stake. The United States has a long history shaped by racism, misogyny, and rigid social control. Many early European settlers were Puritans who left England not for freedom, but because the Church of England was becoming too tolerant for their beliefs. Their worldview emphasized strict hierarchy, obedience, and moral enforcement, ideas that still echo in American politics today. In 1607, the English colony of Jamestown was established in what is now Virginia, named after King James I. Early settlers faced extreme hardship and survival depended heavily on learning to live and trade with the indigenous peoples. Over time, these settlements expanded into 13 British colonies along the eastern seaboard. As generations passed, resentment grew toward rule from England. Heavy taxation, lack of representation, and control by a distant monarch. By the mid-1700s, rebellion was inevitable. A group of revolutionaries, some with roots in earlier uprisings against the British Crown, like the Jacobites, rose up against King George III. The American Revolution was brutal and chaotic, lasting from 1775 to 1783. In 1776, colonial leaders gathered to define what this new nation would stand for. Thomas Jefferson was tasked with drafting what would become the most important founding document in U.S. history, the Declaration of Independence. Though debated and revised by many, it was ultimately signed by 56 delegates, with 39 actively affixing their names at the time. The Declaration laid out a radical idea for its era, that governments exist to serve the people, that power is derived from consent, and that citizens have the right to challenge tyranny. And this is why it matters today. Project 2025 makes no commitment to uphold the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. Instead, it prioritizes centralized authority, executive dominance, and ideological control, values fundamentally at odds with the founding promise of the American experiment. For nearly a century after independence, the United States expanded rapidly, growing from 13 states to more than 30 through territorial acquisition and war, including lands taken from French control in the Midwest and South. Much of this expansion was built on an economic system rooted in slavery. Large plantations dominated the South, producing cash crops like cotton and tobacco that positioned the U.S. as a major trading nation. Enslaved Africans were forced to work these fields under brutal conditions, treated not as human beings but as property. In 1860, The election of Abraham Lincoln brought this moral contradiction to a breaking point. The core issue was simple: no human being should own another. But Southern plantation owners saw this as a threat to their wealth and power. The nation became divided. The Civil War erupted in 1861 and lasted until 1865. It remains the bloodiest conflict ever fought on American soil. The Union prevailed and slavery was formally abolished. But freedom did not bring equality. For another century, Black Americans were subjected to segregation, violence, and systematic discrimination. Legally barred from equal education, housing, employment, and political power, Jim Crow laws enforced a radical hierarchy through intimidation and terror. After Black Americans were allowed to serve and fight in World War II, pressure for change intensified. A civil rights movement began to take shape, driven by the simple demand that democracy applies to everyone. The 1950s and 1960s brought landmark civil rights legislation that ended legal separation and established equal protection under the law. But while laws changed, attitudes did not always follow. Racism did not disappear, it adapted, and it remains present today in those who believe that if you are not white, you do not belong. People are not born racist, they are taught to be racist. Project 2025 doesn't restore white rule by saying it out loud. It restores it by dismantling the systems that once forced America to confront inequality. This is not something that is yet to come, it has already started. In 2025, the US government sent out their ICE thugs to round up anyone who looked Mexican, regardless of their citizenship status or what they may have done. They also started locking up any tourists that they felt they could pin something on, even if it was a social post that the agent didn't like. Now, a year later, they are looking at other races, and the abduction of people off the streets continues as the hatred and racism grows. Despite the suffrage movement and the legal right to vote, women in the United States continue to be demonized, controlled, and legislated over. Little girls are still taught they can be anything they want to be, but increasingly, American policy and politic rhetoric suggests the government sees women primarily as breeders, responsible for producing and raising children, regardless of personal choice, health, or circumstance. The ideological movement behind Project 2025 supports the rollback of reproduction health care access. Since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, women have already died after being denied life-saving medical care, not because treatment didn't exist, but because doctors were legally afraid to provide it. This same movement has worked to dismantle DEI initiatives, arguing that protections for women and marginalized groups are unnecessary or anti-family. In reality, these policies weaken women's ability to work, advance, and exist independently within society. Women are not the only targets. Project 2025 aligned goals include abolishing same-sex marriage, restricting adoption and family rights for same-sex couples, denying gender-affirming medical care to trans people. These positions are justified using selective religious interpretations amplified by political organizations and media figures who frame control as morality. The irony is hard to ignore. Many of the loudest advocates for traditional family values hold positions of wealth, influence, and power, often supported by women who work publicly while preaching that other women belong at home. This isn't about faith, It's about hierarchy, and women's autonomy is the cost. Project 2025 doesn't erase women's rights in one stroke, it makes them conditional, and conditional rights are not rights at all. The modern conservative project did not appear overnight. Its foundations stretch back to the Nixon era, 1973, when political strategists learned that cultural fear, racial resentment, and law and order messaging could be used to consolidate power. The Heritage Foundation emerged as a powerful conservative think tank with a very specific mission: turning ideology into governing reality. Unlike traditional policy institutions, Heritage did not focus on theory or long-term debate. It focused on action, producing ready-to-use legislation, executive orders, staffing lists, and transitional plans designed to be implemented immediately when political opportunity arose. Over decades, think tanks refined these ideas into accountable governance strategy. This approach fundamentally changed how conservative power operates in the United States. Heritage became less of a think tank and more of an operational command center for conservative governance. Project 2025 represents the most advanced version of that strategy. Spanning hundreds of pages, it lays out a plan set to dramatically expand executive authority, weaken independent institutions, centralize power within the presidency, and roll back civil rights protections, all while bypassing traditional checks and balances. Supporters frame this as efficiency and reform. Critics warn it is a roadmap toward authoritarian governance where democracy is completely dismantled. On a side note, Trump was running against Hillary Clinton in his first election. If it had been a man, there's a very good chance he would have lost. This is a misogynist country, and there are many people that believe a woman cannot run the country. Thank you for being here. I hope you like the content. I sifted through their website so you wouldn't have to. We live in a scary world and we need to stay aware. Please hit the like and subscribe if you haven't already. It only takes a second and we appreciate it so much. Eventually, the conservative movement aligned with Heritage and Project 2025 found a political figure willing to advance its agenda. Donald Trump, elected in 2016 as the 45th President of the United States. Through a mix of personal alignment, shared grievances, and strategic opportunity, Trump's presidency embraced a disruptive style that challenged established norms and institutions. His direct, outspoken approach, saying whatever he wanted and breaking conventional political etiquette, made him highly popular among many Americans. It didn't matter that he had absolutely no experience to run a country, but he had been on a TV show and knew how to brand himself. That is what Project 2025 needed: a man and persona that loved to be in front of the camera. In 2016, Russian operatives conducted cyber campaigns, hacked emails, and spread disinformation aimed at influencing the United States election. Investigators were tasked with determining whether Trump's campaign conspired with Russia to gain an advantage. The Mueller investigation from 2017 to 2019 investigated links between Trump's campaign officials and Russian interference. The report found extensive contacts between campaign associates and Russians, but did not establish a criminal conspiracy with Trump himself. However, the report did not fully exonerate him, particularly regarding obstruction of justice. Excuse me. Once in office, he began implementing policies consistent with his agenda, promoting tariffs, reshaping the judiciary, reducing oversight of federal agencies, talk of annexing other countries, and challenging international agreements. His administration's response to the COVID-19 pandemic was widely criticized for downplaying the severity of the virus, delaying coordinated action, and spreading misinformation, all of which contribute to many deaths. Over time, these policies and controversies caused some supporters to distance themselves, but the structural and ideological shifts he initiated continued to influence American politics and set the stage for the next phase of the movement. The plan was disrupted in 2020 with the election of Joe Biden. Donald Trump refused to accept the result, repeatedly claiming the election was rigged and illegitimate. Imagine a man that has had more failures in his life than successes. He can't believe that people wanted him out of office. He was angry over the loss. He first refused to leave the White House, and then he incited an excuse me, I'm just coming off a cold. An insurrection in which the U.S. Capitol was attacked by his supporters in order to stop the passing of power. It was a horrifying act, and 5 people died as a result. But this moment was never just about one man losing power. When Trump left office, the infrastructure behind his presidency did not disappear. The think tanks, donor networks, legal strategists, media ecosystems, and ideological roadmaps remained fully intact. Project 2025 exists because of that moment. It represents a recognition that relying on personality alone was not enough, that the next attempt would be deeper institutional control, tighter coordination, and fewer guardrails. In that sense, Project 2025 is not a reaction to defeat, it is a lesson learned. The 2024 election brought Trump back into power, unfortunately, ready to pick up where he left off. With a new running mate in J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, and his past advisor still lurking in the background, parroting the talking points of Project 2025, the administration hit the ground running. His entire cabinet is largely made up of longtime supporters of the plan. Project 2025 isn't just about ideology, it's about restructuring the government itself. Agencies like FEMA, public health care programs, and federal oversight bodies are on the chopping block. Disaster response, social safety nets, and healthcare access are shifting away from federal responsibility, leaving states and private contractors to fill the gaps. Vaccines and public health programs could face weakened coordination and politicized oversight. The administration didn't waste any time. They're methodologically knocking these priorities off the list like they're racing against a clock. The goal is clear: limit the federal government's ability to protect people while concentrating power in the presidency. This isn't about one policy here or there, it's about reshaping the system so that when people need help the most, the government may no longer be able to respond. Another side note: if he had ran against a man, would he be here today? I'm not saying that Kamala did anything wrong or anything, except she was a woman. Listening to many podcasts and debates, so many people were asked, why did you support Trump? And their answer is, because a woman can't run the country. It is sad, but it seems to be true. So please, in 2028, have a strong male candidate running against Trump's people. Since the end of World War II, the United States has been a primary target for foreign propaganda and disinformation, particularly from the Soviet Union and later the Russian Federation. The goal has never been to convince Americans of one ideology, but to divide them, dismantle trust in democratic institutions, and push political movements towards extremes. U.S. intelligence agencies have repeatedly documented efforts by foreign actors to amplify social conflict, spread misinformation, and exploit existing grievances with American society. These campaigns thrive in polarized environments where truth is contested and institutions are weakened. There is no public evidence that the Kremlin had a hand in the creation of Project 2025. However, the overlap between foreign disinformation goals and the outcomes Project 2025 would produce, increased division, institutional distrust, and democratic erosion, raises serious questions worth examining. While Project 2025 doesn't explicitly call for military conquest to secure resources, it does emphasize critical minerals and resource supply chain independence as strategic priorities. The goal is to lessen reliance on foreign sources. Think about this in relation to the U.S. invasion on January the 3rd of Venezuela. Project 2025 may be an American plan, but its consequences are not confined to the United States. Ideas, strategies, and influence do not stop at borders. If extremism is allowed to reshape governance in one country, it can ripple outward, economically, politically, and socially. A quote from Stephen Miller: "We live in a real world that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world since the beginning of time." Batman, I swear. Really? No. You dickhead Nazi. We live in a world that seeks peace and by the rule of democracy. For the most part, it is little pukes like him that spread the hatred in this world, or at least throughout the United States. Project 2025 is not a single policy document, and it's not just about one election or one man. It represents a broader effort to concentrate power, weaken federal protections, and redefine the role of government in moments when people are most vulnerable. History shows us that democratic systems don't rarely collapse overnight. They are dismantled gradually through normalization rhetoric, weakened institutions, and the quiet removal of safeguards people once assumed would always be there. Whether you live in the United States or beyond its borders, the consequences of these shifts matter. Economic stability, global security, public health, and democratic norms are interconnected. What happens in one country does not stay contained within it. This isn't about panic, it's about paying attention, asking hard questions, verifying sources, and recognizing patterns when they emerge, even when it's uncomfortable. Democracy only works if people are willing to defend it before it's already gone. The United States, sadly, has become the enemy and a predator. The government has turned against its own people and its allies around the world. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, be kind, and stay groovy. Peace and love, y'all.